Okay. Okay, I call the meeting to order, please. We have, okay, got it. Good, okay. Call the meeting to order. We have public audience number one. Is there anyone in the public audience have anything to say? No public audience, we move on. Minutes of March 7th. Can we have a motion?
We can't take a vote on any minutes
Nope,
without a quorum,
That's
sir.
right. Yep, okay.
You can do that at the next meeting.
We just have to, next meeting. Janice, be sure you make a copy of that for us, okay?
Sure.
Okay, so we move on to Latimer Lane renovation. So first item on the agenda for Latimer Lane is who wants to report first?
All right, I'll touch on things first, and then
Yep.
if we could, since we're not going to be able to vote, I would suggest we reverse the order of items B and C on the agenda, and follow on with the Tecton report, which will have the lion's share of the information for tonight. Since the meeting 2 weeks ago, the project team has, as we shared last time, been deep into the reconciliation process for the estimates, comparing the approach that each of the estimators took, and also reviewing the design to make sure that everyone understood the content of the project and didn't include things that were unwarranted. In addition to reconciling the numbers, which were, as we mentioned, relatively close to begin with between the two estimators, there were some areas of misinterpretation which helped to shave some of that overage. We've also looked at various approaches to achieving the goals of the project without touching any of the project program. And we were able to clarify and settle in on some more comfortable numbers on different approaches to accomplish the goals of the project. So there is no compromise to the ed specs at present. There are some value management recommendations or suggestions that will be shared later in the meeting, but none of those have been incorporated. None of the things that would alter the quality of the project or from what you may have been familiar with from the last level of design. These are options for future action, but nothing has been implemented yet off of that value management list. So those are opportunities for discussion. Overall, as we reviewed the actions of a couple of weeks ago, the other actions that were on the table at that point in time is that the negotiations for O&G's contract were still bouncing between the town's attorney and O&G. I can report that those negotiations have been completed and that I'm in the process of finalizing those documents for signature. So that's all gone in the direction we had hoped. That there was some clarification of language with the town's insurance agent that we were able to get in the last couple of days, which helped bring that to closure. As we touched base, the lion's share of the discussion at the last meeting was about the price and the content of the project. There were some concerns about, particularly about the type of mechanical system, which will be discussed later on. There was also a question about the roof and whether we redo the roof or redo portions of the roof. As you may recall, the roof, when it was replaced, was done under a statutory scheme that resulted in a tremendous amount of insulation at the high points of the roof and near nothing at the roof drains. The current approach is not to spend roughly $1 million to redo the roof in total, but to deal with those areas in the middle of the building where the drains are that were, as we discussed last time, under insulated compared to what code would have you do today. And that is the current approach, which was one of the steps that helped us with reconciling some costs the last 2 weeks. So what we'll end up with is a roof system from an insulation standpoint that is definitely as good as what code would call for today. And when you consider the tremendous amount of insulation used to bring up the half-inch pitch that was required some years ago, you're actually over-insulated in other areas of the building, which all helps. We're still in the process of verifying how we might be able to renew a 20-year warranty on the entire roof system, which would set you up in a good position to put photovoltaics on the roof. So we know that that's an important step that the committee would like to pursue. So we still have some unanswered questions on the extended warranty of the roof, but we'll get into that as we move the project forward. So again, those are touching on the high points, the volume of data that's in the Tecton slide presentation is really the meat of tonight's discussion. So if we,
Yeah, but basically I want to go back to the original budget was $33,943,376. That is what went through referendum. That is what we have to spend. And right now the total budget is $30,700,000, which is
No,
$3,243,376 over budget at this point. Is that correct?
the construction budget in the number that went to referendum would allow us 30,700,000 for construction.
Right.
The current number without taking those value management cuts is 33.9, giving us a 3.2 million overage. And where those dollars seem to have come from and what we might be able to further do to reduce that number is discussed in detail in Tecton's presentation.
Okay. But I just want to get that in the record that we are $2 million or $3 million over at this point.
Right. So after 2 weeks of reconciliation and some rethinking of certain aspects that are not quality or program driven, but different methodologies to get to our original goal, we've reduced what looked like a $7 million problem down to a $3.2 million discussion.
Right. Okay. Go ahead.
This is still at DD phase, right? So that we wouldn't have to consider a budget problem until we were locking into a GMP once construction documents came out, right?
Technically, before we go to the state with our bid documents for their authorization to go to bid, we have to show that we're either on budget or that we've received a supplemental authorization for the dollars that exceed the budget.
Right. We got to get the money in hand before we can get the project started. But we go out to bid, but before we can say go, we have to get all the money in the bank, so to speak.
Before we get to the Tecton's discussion of these items, can we talk a little bit about schedule impact of how this discussion is going to play out over the proposed schedule?
Quite honestly, we would really rather focus on the dollars today so that we know exactly what we're moving forward with in the completion of the documents for CDs. And that discussion may have some impacts on the schedule. So we'd like to.
I understand that's what you'd rather do, but
yeah,
from a committee side, I'd like to know if we'd also having schedule impacts. You may not be able to have everything, but as we're sitting here now, understanding we haven't made choices yet, but that we have the fact that we haven't, put things out to bid yet, where we are in that process. Are we already behind where the schedule would have been? Are we 2 weeks behind? Are we a month behind already? Not so much where we're going to end up, but where are we already?
I would say, generally speaking, there has been some slippage on the design schedule due to the efforts to reconcile the budget. There is also, as you heard at the last meeting, an aim for a 24-month construction period, which is what would provide the school with the number of classrooms available without needing to rent trailers, rather than what was originally discussed as an 18-month renovation schedule. So that's still the general trajectory. Frankly, among the team, there are concerns with the current availability of materials. So how we approach those 24 months, and again, that's the level of construction team involvement that we've bought in O&G's contract. We originally thought there might be an early phase where we could kickstart the additions this spring and then get into the renovations slightly later. That turned out not to be productive. So we're looking at a concerted effort of 24 months from when the full package of construction documents are put out to bid and awarded in order to implement the new construction as well as the renovation. There was a scenario explored by O&G to try to squeeze it into 18 months. And that reduced the number of available classrooms to the school. So from an operational standpoint, that was unattractive.
Understood. There was also discussion of putting out certain early packages. Is that still part of this discussion? And if so, when is that feasibly going to start?
Dave, I know Dave Cravenzola and I have touched on that, and there is a meeting tomorrow with OSCGR, our design development review, where we will inquire as to what the methodology would be that they would permit for early packages for like equipment procurement, and then assign that equipment to the bidders once we're ready to hire contractors for that. That's not a tremendously attractive scenario for them, for OSCG to approve. But given the difficulties in the market, we don't think that we're the first one that will be in this predicament. So that is part of our discussion schedule for tomorrow.
Okay, so that's the equipment procurement. There was also early packages for site development and, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, we had once talked about an early phase where we would try to jumpstart the additions. Whether a site development package all by itself really dovetails due to the varied nature of the phasing of the project. I don't know that we would really gain a lot if we just let a site package itself out, since the site contractor is touching multiple areas over a broad spectrum of time. So I think that one idea that's come forward is, do we let contracts and allow folks to order materials, but delay the implementation of work in the field until we have certainty that those materials will be available? One example that we've heard of recently is that electrical switchgear is somewhere between 50 and 70 weeks once the shop drawings are approved. If we get the addition or additions erected, but we can't provide the power to run the building to carry those additions for several months after the additions are done, that doesn't seem to be the best use of the town's investment. So there are a bunch of unconventional approaches that are being discussed that we have to look into further, quite honestly, before we can give you a solid projection or recommendation on a schedule.
Okay,
Ryan, just going back to what we originally started, as you well know, when we first started this project, we had XYZ, both budget-wise, delivery-wise, so on and so forth. What's been going on with all this stuff we've been going through, that's changing. It's going to change every month. To sit here and say, are you guaranteeing we're going to get delivery tomorrow? I don't think anybody here can sit here and say that.
Oh, I'm not asking for a guarantee. What I'm asking for is, where are we? How have we already been impacted to this point? Not so much where are we going to end up, but are we where we expected to be by March 31st?
We're about 4 months behind, I would say, at this point, John. Are we not?
Right now, I think we would do well, and Justin or Jeff, chime in if you wish. We had anticipated construction documents to be done possibly by the end of May. We believe that that's likely to shift till the end of June.
Right.
And then to go through the OSCG approval process and to go out to bid, I would say the earliest that we'd be signing any construction contracts would be in the timeframe of September. So yes, from that standpoint, the kickstart.
Wait, we're losing the whole summer now?
There may be other ways we can mitigate that, but I'm saying in general.
I'm sorry, this is just a bit shocking. Everything on this program was built around taking advantage of this summer when the kids aren't there. That, like, if that's not even on the table, I don't know why I'm first learning about this tonight.
Again, these are discussions that are still premature because we don't have some of the data necessary in order to make official updates and recommendations on a schedule. That's why we were hoping to get through tonight's meeting and let those discussions mature.
All right. I get that. One more question, I'll let move on. And Jeff, if you could chime in, I want to go back to these early packages because that's been part of this discussion from the beginning. I believe it was steel. We're going to purchase the steel. I believe it was site work, and there was one other that it's escaping me at the moment. Can you kind of explain what's shifted there? Because I'm not understanding why why the philosophy on that has changed.
Sure. So I think the three that you're referring to are steel, concrete, and site.
Yep.
And I think when ONG came on board and started to look at the phasing and implementation, so the original strategy was to build both additions at the same time and
Yep.
try to get ahead of the game, early release concrete, steel, and site for those areas so that we can start building those early. That became more and more complicated because of material sourcing. Things like we're running into another job with like roofing isn't available for months. It just blows schedules. So the mindset has shifted a little bit, and we touched upon it I think a little bit with the change of the design of the mechanical system. So you could start with the building additions and work kind of counterclockwise around the building if you were to look at it on your screen. So that's where I think we deviated from when we were originally thinking, all right, let's hit the ground running, let's try to get these additions built first so that we can use them. The problem is you just can't get the stuff in time. You can't get the materials needed to kind of enclose it was critical path. So you couldn't get a roof on, so you couldn't do anything on the inside of the additions in enough time to use those as swing space. So that's why it kind of complicated things. And to ONG's credit and to the principal and the rest of the staff, we took another look at phasing it, and we came up with a plan that was kind of counterclockwise, planimetrically, so that we could progressively work through the building. So I don't know anymore if it makes sense to try to do a summer. There's obviously it'd be great to capture the summer, to do some summer work. It's just, I don't know if you're going to have materials in order to do the work. So that's things have dramatically changed in a variety of different areas since we first started. So.
Okay. So last question, and obviously I do appreciate that this was not what tonight was supposed to be for.
Sure.
But now that we're talking about a 24-month program and not an 18, is that meaning that a September start date puts us 2 years from September then?
I believe so. Yeah, I believe what Dave has worked out with detailed phasing is, forget about whenever that start date is. It's 24 months of concurrent construction in various different portions of the building. And I don't, Dave, maybe you can speak to it because you're most familiar with it. Does it matter when summer or breaks fall in your phasing plan?
Well, the phasing plans that we reviewed with Neil and Jason and Mike a few weeks ago, they were based upon that initial trajectory of having some time this summer, and they did work around those, either the summer or the mid-year break. So we're off that cadence now. So if we were, all things being equal, if each of those phases stayed the exact same duration, we would be off. So some of those moves would not be just at a summer or a mid-year, they would happen off the cadence of that.
So we're looking at least probably until September 2024 for substantial completion.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think part of the shock, which I share with Ryan, is that when we discussed that early bid package not making sense, we thought that was from a financial standpoint, not that it was going to add 6 to 10 months to the schedule if we didn't make that happen.
Well, I guess one thing, Mike, to talk about that with the problem is, by putting some things in an early package, the lead time issues that we're having with some of the other materials, it's exacerbating that problem. Because the problem is we could start, but the problem is the building is going to wait there now for these critical materials for an even longer period of time. Again, one of the biggest deal breakers we're seeing right now is the switchgear that I think it was Jack alluded to, that, we could move the construction of that building as soon as possible, but it is going to sit there with no function whatsoever until the electrical brains of it actually are able to be installed and brought all the equipment online. So the issue is that some of the, again, the continuing to evolve lead times is just, it's making the situation worse and pushing some portions of the work ahead. It's even worse. Again, unless you start talking about trying to zero in on all of these other materials that their lead times are increasing, then you're talking about HVAC equipment, you're talking about the roofing material, you're talking about the electrical. Next thing you know is you have an early package that's, half of the project, or whatever it is, 40% of the project. And so it's not just trying to advance some of the early work.
Yeah, and I understand. And I guess I thought it was, we can wait 6 months and then it takes 18, or we can start now and it takes 24. What I didn't anticipate is somebody saying that we've got to wait 6 months and it's still going to take 24.
Right.
Well, I think part of it is just clarification, is that actually it was with the enabling, with starting some work earlier, it was always a 24-month duration of construction. So we are still keeping it that. It's just, it's not the enabling and then a separate package. It's all one.
It was June to the end of December.
It was work.
The schedule that was put into the request for proposals to the construction managers, by the time that document was published, discussions had progressed to the point of trying to get something underway in March of 2022, which then gave an overall duration. The enabling work would potentially start in March, and then the June to December timeline of 18 months on top of that, perhaps. But overall, by the time we got to the RFP, the schedule totaled up to 24 months worth of construction. So that's what is in the proposal that we received from each of the CMs. And you own that staffing and general conditions presently. And that was the trajectory was we thought it might make sense to get started on early portions of it in the spring. And that's what differentiates it.
Yeah, can I ask you a couple of questions?
Yes.
The impact on the students, I think, is key to the parents and a key to the running of the school. Mm-hmm. And you earlier had mentioned that you had met with the principal and how far is he into the 24-month plan, and is he able to accept a 30-month plan? I mean, I can tell you from being in construction myself that things are only going to get worse before they get better, and we're not sure when they're going to get better. And I think that's part of the presentation that Tecton is going to give us tonight, is hopefully at what point do they think some of these critical path materials are going to get a little bit better. Right now, things are just not good for the supply chain.
Right.
Yeah. Well, again, from a managing of expectations, the presentation tonight is not focusing on schedule, it's focusing on the dollars. To your question, though, about coordinating with the principal,
right?
ONG's initial pass through, and Dave, chime in if I'm misstating anything. They did an initial pass of what they would need as far as areas of the building to complete renovation within the 18-month schedule. What it left as available classrooms was insufficient,
right,
to operate the school without having to spend money on trailers.
Right.
Within the team, including the principal, the conversation was it would be a better investment for the town to put the money into the building rather than putting it into rentals for the trailers. And ONG revisited that phasing approach and came up with a methodology that provided a sufficient number of spaces. There might be in final discussion, there might be some temporary facility or short portion of the day spaces or office spaces that might need to go to an office type of trailer. If we can't, by the time all the exiting diagrams and whatnot are factored in, that would be the worst case, is that we would have a little extra general use space, not having to rent classroom trailers. But the thrust being to provide space for the school to operate within the school. And that is what.
Jason, do you have anything you want to add to that? Jason,
I have nothing to add, no.
do you agree with what's being said here as from the Board of Education side of the fence?
Yes, I was in those meetings. Neil and I were in those.
That's what we want to know.
meetings. Yes,
So you're agreeing with what they're saying?
yes.
And they're not going to have an effect on the school system?
Well, as these gentlemen have stated, the key is having enough classroom space. We know how many general use classrooms we need at Latimer Lane School over the next 2+ years. And the phasing plan that we worked through allowed us to fit the projected number of students into the building during the various phases. So that's where we've been at with those meetings. I mean, so, would I like to see September of 2024 as substantial completion? Yes. If we have to go a couple months more, as long as we have the number of classrooms, we can make it work.
If I could just interject quickly, I saw that Mr. Kelly has arrived, so I believe we now have a quorum.
Oh, good. Is he on board, Mr. Kelly? Where is he? Fran Kelly?
I think he dropped out again.
This is Lucian. I'm on the phone. I'm participating as
Oh,
well. For
Lucian,
whatever reason, I cannot.
So we have a
connect with
quorum
you.
now. Okay. All right, Lucian. All right, go ahead.
I've been on the meeting for at least 15 minutes now, 20 minutes
Okay.
maybe.
All right, well, we don't see you here, that's all.
Well, it's the phone because I cannot connect to Zoom for whatever reason. I don't know.
Okay, okay. Go ahead, let's continue. We have a quorum.
All right, so that wraps up the summary that I was intending to give. Mr. Deere, did I answer your question sufficiently?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're in concert with the school and the fact that they realize it's going to be a 24-month schedule and it could go beyond that. And that we need to just be checking in with them as often as we need to make sure it works.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, we meet once a month at least, so I guess we'd be getting interest back from John and back from Jason and Tom. Oh, by the way, I didn't introduce Tom Roy sitting down here. Tom Roy, by the way, is taking Jeff Shea's spot. He's the new town engineer for us, and he represents the town for the engineering side of the fence, and he's here at our meeting, so we're getting him aware, hopefully, what's going on as well. So those that don't know Tom is sitting down here also. But I think we meet once a month, and going through this, we'll be getting these schedules and getting these updates once a month, that if there's a problem going on, we can try to correct it at that point or make some change or whatever, Ryan. So this is, it's got to take one step at a time. Get it up and running. Right?
Let's get to the money.
Yep.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. So again, the heart of tonight's discussion will be centering on Tecton's presentation. So without further ado.
Tecton.
Justin, I think you have the ability to screen share, but let me just tee it up as far as, so we tried to keep it very brief and tried to keep the numbers on point for the discussion purposes, but we wanted to explain where we are today, basically in very basic form. How did we get here? What happened along the way? Because that was a question that you asked at the last time. And then what can we do about it? So that's kind of the general structure of the presentation. Justin's going to walk you through the details, and then we can certainly answer any questions and have more detailed backup that we're not planning to present tonight, but we can certainly answer any questions.
Okay.
Justin.
Okay, thank you. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So as we discussed, our overage, after reconciling two cost estimates, we are at $33,943,376, which gives us a variance over budget of $3,243,376. So as Jeff said, we're looking at how do we get here, right, wrong, or indifferent. Some of these are self-inflicted, some of these are unforeseen, but major scope changes that we have identified from grant application to where we are now, which is design development, We have since had a geotechnical report that has identified unsuitable material that needs to be excavated and replaced under our north addition. It's approximately 4,600 cubic yards of unsuitable soil that in this cost estimate has full removal and replacement with structural fill.
Is that the TRC recommendation?
That is the, yes.
Okay.
Well,
No,
not the
that's
TRC.
SLR.
That's SLR, the geotechnical engineer. So unsuitable materials, organic, fine, silty soil, soil that is unsuitable for bearing, for structural bearing. And sometimes it's from organic fill or urban fill, where sometimes you.
I think we got it.
You got it? Okay. We also have our existing roof thermal improvement, as Jack had identified. This scope of work replaces the non-conforming insulation thickness on the roof and partially replaces the roof membrane. So that number is about $384,000. We had not identified subsurface stormwater detention in the original grant application. The assumption is that we would be able to surface runoff to detention basins within the existing site due to keeping the existing parking area. We don't have enough area to put the volume necessary for a surface detention system. So we have a subsurface detention system that totals $213,000. Obviously, we had a discussion about our geothermal heating and cooling system. This was not part of the calculations at the grant application. This is showing a delta of about $1 million. It is also worth noting that our square foot area has increased by 1,100 square feet. And there's a reason for that. The original grant application assumed that we were not using the existing basement. The existing basement is about 2,200 square feet. Because our existing boilers are down there, we have to calculate the entire area, which has increased or inflated our overall square footage. We've been able to economize and stem that overage a bit by having a relatively efficient floor plan. So our delta is 1,100 square feet, but that overage does have a cost of 3,000 square feet.
Can I ask a question? If you could go back to the geothermal heating and cooling system.
Yep.
Now, that was not part of the original scope. That's been added in. Is there other types of heating and cooling systems that we can use and to reduce those costs? It's $1 million. That's 33% of the problem.
You're looking into that.
So that if I can ask for your patience, we have that identified in a couple of slides.
Okay, and the only other question I have is that you will be getting back to us sometime with this warranty, the possibility of getting a 20-year warranty, what we have to do for this existing roof thermal improvement, because that $383,000 doesn't include what we may have to do to the roof to get the 20-year warranty.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
we just don't want to lose sight of that number. That could be $50,000. It could be $100,000.
Yep.
Okay,
Understood.
great.
A couple of
Thank you.
questions on this slide too.
Okay.
Geothermal heating and cooling, is that value that for just the 50% of the wells, or you're saying that's the increase compared to what was assumed during grant application?
That is the increase, and I may need some help.
Justin, that's the full, that's essentially what that's the premium of geothermal over a non-geothermal system. So if we went to a conventional
What Mike's
system,
asking it,
We're not
what
even
Mike
using
is
the full geo system with this budget. It's just 50%.
correct.
I'm sorry, Mike, say that again.
The 33 million and change budget doesn't include full geo. That's just 50% wells, right?
No, it
That's
does.
correct.
It does, Mike. It's 50% on the existing building and 50% on the new, for a total of 100%.
No,
If you look at the budget, they have 50% on each, on the
No, I
new
don't-
and
I
50%
don't
on
think that's
existing.
correct, Lucian.
yeah, but the system is it's 50%. it's 50% of the size of the geothermal system that would be needed to power to serve the entire building. It's a hybrid system, right, Brian?
No, it's not.
Yes, correct. No, that's correct,
Whoa,
Lucian.
whoa, whoa, wait a second, Brian. In the budget, you have 50% of the geothermal for the new construction, and you have 50% for geothermal on the existing building. So 50 plus 50, that's 100%. So it's not a hybrid system.
Lucian,
full
that's just how
geothermal.
they allocated the dollars in the budget. That's more of a title than a summation of the load.
Well, it's not the load, it's the money. I don't care about the load.
The
So if
money
they say that I have
half the
50% of the money it's on the existing and 50% it's on the new, that's a total.
No, it's not. It's not. If it reads like that, I'm sorry, but it's not. It's what was the costs that are in the estimate is when you add up the addition amount, you know, the part that's allocated towards the addition and the part that's allocated towards the renovation, that system that's priced there is a system that has, again, approximately half the number of geothermal wells as the full system.
So that
Okay.
was a piece that, Lucian, if you're looking at the DD set, you're right, it showed 100%. When we went through reconciliation, the what should have been in the base contract set, what we should have priced was the 50% hybrid. So that's what the reconciled estimate represents.
Okay.
I think that's where,
Reconcile.
yeah.
Right.
So just to be clear, this 1 million and change is the premium for the 50% hybrid system.
No.
Yeah.
Compared to what was carried at grant application time. I think
Okay.
that's-
Yes.
That's the context.
Thank you.
So I'm still unclear on that. So that value is of the wells and not the delta to an alternate mechanical system that was assumed during grant application?
That's
That,
You'll see it in the reduction in the next few slides. You'll see
Yeah.
the value.
I guess we'll move on. So number 5, the square foot area increase, is that 283,000 just because we're reusing the boilers, or is there an additional reason that the mechanical room's needed?
so this is so at this level, we're looking at cost per square foot for this area. So this is just a baseline cost per square foot of square foot overage, okay, in the existing building. So that is not the cost to use the basement.
Okay.
I'm sorry, and I know we what are we paying for with this $283,000 specifically?
This, I tried to say is that it's not a specific dollar amount. It's a value that you apply to the square footage based on what our dollars per square foot of existing building are.
Right. So we're expanding the square footage by using the basement where the boilers are, correct? That's what we're talking about?
Yep, correct.
And all we're doing is leaving the boilers there. Or putting the boilers there.
Well, that's somewhat true. You're leaving the existing boilers. We have to take out what you left there, which is all the old boilers. Then we have to go and put in kind of fire protection. We've got to put in the electrical. We've got to put in the fire alarm. So
that's the answer then. So that's
right.
okay. So there's
Okay.
actual work to be done there.
Absolutely. If that basement wasn't there,
Would have
we
to
would
build
have
it.
to do all those things. Yep.
So
Yeah.
if we weren't reusing the boilers, would you be demoing the basement?
What we've done in past projects so that it didn't count against our maximum allowable is we'd seal up the basement. Believe it or not, we'd seal it up and not use it. That is
Okay.
correct. Yep.
Nope.
And what's the value on the boilers again?
What boilers? The ones to remain?
How much did we just pay for
Existing.
them?
Oh,
So-
let's do something. Jason.
Brian, can you answer that?
I don't remember off the top of my head. Probably
Jason.
close to 600-700 grand.
Okay. Thank you.
Jason, what was the real value? It was 2 something, right?
Yeah,
285.
Thank you.
the whole project was about, 285, 290,
290, I thought, yeah,
but that's all in. That's not just the boilers themselves.
right.
That work's already been done?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Move on.
Great. Okay. So you add up all those scope changes. We have a couple of different line items here. If you add up all of the costs on the previous sheet, we have approximately $2.3 million in what we identify as scope change. And then we also have a delta in escalation. So your original grant application cost estimate had a 4% escalation, which was the best information that we had at the time. The actual escalation from grant estimate time to today is 13.75%. So there's a delta of 7.5% here. Actually, it's actually we're 9.75%. Sorry, this is wrong percentage here.
But the number is correct. Though.
The number is correct. So you add up the scope change, you add up the escalation. We have about 5.2 million in as the crow flies, right? In analysis, we have about 5.28 in overages from the grant application estimate. Okay. So that is just a hypothetical number as we look at scope changes and the escalation when we know that our actual number is in the 3.2 million range. So some strategies for making up ground in our current estimate.
If you could just for a second go back to the scope changes that add up to $2.287 million.
Yep.
That's what we were just looking at before. Those all add up. Okay, there was no additional. Okay, I got it. Okay.
Yeah.
1 through 5 adds up to 2.2 million.
Right.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
thank
correct.
you. Yep.
And our delta in escalation.
Yeah, it's a 2.9. Right, I got it.
Yeah, it's 2.9.
So you get the 5 million. Okay.
Yeah.
5.2.
So some strategies for, and I'll clean up that slide. We'll send it through to everybody afterwards. So we realized that this wasn't part of your packet that went out on Thursday. It's because we were still working through some of these revisions or scope reductions. So a few strategies here. We've discussed with the geotechnical engineer a way to, in the areas of slab on grade where we have relatively light loading and not at the areas of footings, spread footings, foundation walls, where we do have to go all the way down to suitable subgrade for the unsuitable material. We have a method of improving the soil by proof rolling it at the locations of the slab on grade. So that will allow us to not have to dig out all the unsuitable material, replace it with structural fill. The economy there is about $115,000. We have a relatively simple specification revision from the design development estimate. We were showing insulated metal panels. We already have insulation encumbered in the exterior wall assembly. Simply by changing this to a metal panel system, we can achieve $174,000. We can look to reduce the extent of impervious landscape areas. So in our overall site plan, we have a lot of area where it's stamped concrete, regular concrete. If we can target areas where we may be able to provide crushed stone dust path or crushed stone, it has a twofold way of providing an economy. One is the actual cost for crushed stone versus concrete. The other is a reduction in the overall stormwater detention piping that's subsurface. So we've targeted approximately $150,000 for that economy. We can eliminate our seat walls, boulders, and benches and tables in the exterior. In other words, we can provide the space that we have allocated out there, but we can reduce some of the amenities in terms of a precast cap seat wall that defines the space rather than just allowing the space to be defined outside anyway. That is about $289,000. The big ticket item, as we discussed, revised the chilled beam mechanical system to a VRV system. That's about a $1 million economy there.
I understand what this chilled beam system is, but what's this VRV stand for?
Brian, you want to give us a quick thumbnail?
Sure. So VRV stands for refrigerant volume, variable refrigerant volume. So it's pretty much just a heat pump system that just sends hot or cold refrigerant throughout the building for heating and cooling terminal units.
Can we make it clear that the fresh air exchanges are the same on this system as it is for chilled beam?
Yeah. So for any system, we still use the same dedicated outdoor air units. Just a matter of the actual cooling and heating in the individual spaces, a different system.
So would there be less of a condensation problem with the VRVs than the chilled beam mechanical with the whole window, opening windows that I talked about a few meetings ago?
Sure. I mean, if you do the chill beam system right, yeah, there's no condensation issues, but yes, there's no issues with condensation with the VRF unit.
Right, right. So it's the savings and then there's no issue with condensation.
Right.
Correct? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Great. I'm going to reshare my screen.
These,
Go ahead, Lucian.
these are ductless split, Rich.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Like the Mitsubishi, the cassettes that you have.
Yep. Yep.
Right.
The VRVs are ductless splits.
Yep.
Okay. Got it.
Okay. We can look to reduce. Oh, any other questions? I know we just kind of buzzed through that one, but any other?
Go ahead.
Okay. We can reduce the building footprint by 1,000 square feet. This would likely be taken out of the area where we have a stage with some nips and tucks elsewhere on the floor plan. That would achieve about $255,000 in savings. We can reduce the stage lighting and rigging. So we have a pretty healthy budget line item for the areas above the stage. We think that we can economize that through work with the principal. That's
Let me ask you a question about the stage. Obviously, They can improve stage lighting and rigging over time, whether it be in a couple of years or 5 years, but increasing the actual square footage of the stage later would be kind of hard to do. So I go back to some of my original comments in terms of the user, the school, the programs that they have that, that require a certain size stage. I just want to make sure that the principal and all of the users of that stage are up to speed on that and agree with that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Run that by the principal.
We're aware of that.
You are, but I'm talking about the principal.
No, the Board of Education. Jason are you there? Jason is aware of it. He's the Board of Education.
Okay, but what about the principal of the school? He's not here tonight. Is he aware of that? Have you met with him and talked to him about that?
We have not met and talked to him about this. We're just identifying big ticket items.
Okay, well, as a follow-up, I think that if
yeah.
it becomes part of the big ticket items that we're going to consider, that somebody has to talk to the principal and see what he has to say about it before we decide to cut that out.
Yes, we're meeting regularly.
Just so everyone's aware, we're meeting regularly, weekly, with the Simsbury Public Schools team and the principal to go over coordination of other items, classrooms, et cetera.
Right.
We're targeting Wednesday meetings for detailed discussions. Lucian, you had your hand raised. I'm sorry.
Yes, thank you, Justin. So okay, we are adding 2,000 square feet in the basement because we are reusing the mechanical space that was down there. But there was some mechanical room that was upstairs by the kitchen or cafeteria.
Yeah.
We are still using that. Is it a
Yes.
trade-off?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we're still using it.
Okay.
If I could just real quick, is there a energy efficiency loss with going from the chilled beam to the VRV?
Brian?
Not noticeable.
No.
I got two quick questions on this slide. One is the landscape changes to the crushed stone. I would expect that with the decrease in the cost to this project, we're increasing the maintenance cost of the building. Am I correct in that assumption?
You are correct in that assumption, especially when you're talking about stone dust paths up to the towards the west of the building at the bottom of the slope. I probably should have started with this is that, look, there's no silver bullet in some of these things. All of these are hard discussions that have some cost benefit analysis as we go through them.
Right. I just, before we go plowing ahead, I'd like to know what the increase may, obviously there's pluses and minuses to having young kids with stone dust. But beyond the kind of aesthetics and usage, I would like to see the numbers on the maintenance costs that we're increasing this building by saving on the upfront construction costs. Also on the seat walls and benches and tables. I get it. You can always buy those later. But also when we go to turn this over to the community, that's going to be something that everybody can get their mind around and see. Not everyone understands HVAC units. Not everyone understands switchgear. Everyone understands places where they sit to watch their kids.
This is the Board of Education decision, Ryan. The Board of Education makes that decision, not us.
Okay.
So that can discuss with Jason. Jason discusses that with the principal and everybody on the staff there, and that's their decision, not ours.
So I can't ask a question as to these price reductions that are being proposed to us?
Oh, yeah, you asked the question, but you're saying we shouldn't do it. Go ahead.
I'm saying I have concerns that I'm expressing.
Okay, go ahead.
When this building gets turned over, that's something that I think would be noticed on those savings. So just something to contemplate.
Okay.
Thank you. The last item on here, well, the two last items here are revised cast iron piping to PVC. There's $18,000 savings. And this is utilize existing underslab sanitary drain. Current documents show the existing underslab sanitary drain being ripped up and replaced. So ONG is scheduling a scope of that line to understand its condition, to see if it makes any sense to be able to save it and utilize the existing sanitary line.
And the storm line.
And the storm line. So this has the potential to be a rather substantial number if it analysis proves that we can, in fact, use the subsurface underslab lines.
Can I hit two quick questions on that?
Sure.
The revised cast iron piping to PVC, is that on the site work elements you had?
I don't believe
within
so.
the building. That's for like internal stormwater piping, some of the underslab piping things. It's not outside, inside.
Okay. And the other thing I'd say is if depending on how the scoping looks and you were looking at keeping the sanitary drain under slab, we've had some good success with lining.
Okay, thank you. So if you add all these up, understanding that we do have a to be determined number here, we're approaching 2.2 estimated savings. We can also build in some additional project alternates. So we have some that are already identified. We have an add alternate to go from partial to full geothermal well field. So when these pluses are next to the dollar value, it means that they're currently not in the existing design development cost estimate. They're in addition to, and they're anticipated to be an add alternate that we can make that determination on bid day. So partial to full geothermal, classroom flooring, a vinyl flooring to rubber flooring. We always, as a matter of practice, build in different levels of flooring. Simply put, a rubber floor is more comfortable, has higher acoustic qualities than other types of vinyl flooring, but however, it also comes at a premium. So we build in these add alternates, and flooring is an easy one to kind of bifurcate from the bid documents and have a base bid and an add alternate. So this would be one emergency generator to go from strictly doing life safety to keep the building warm and your freezers and coolers running, to a more robust full building emergency generator that goes from 2 kW to 400 kW. That's about $100,000 premium. Adding entry canopies that are a nice feature for the exterior of the building for kids to stand out as they wait for their parents to pick them up under a canopy. We've identified that as $120,000 add alternate. Those are the ones that are already built in. Potential future add alternates is our storage shed. So we do have a storage shed that replaces the existing storage shed that's over by the basketball courts. We can simply identify that as an add alternate and perhaps gain an economy of 123. We can change our gymnasium floor from its current specification of a wood athletic floor to a poured rubber floor, and then build in an add alternate that changes that to a wood athletic floor. That's $27,000 and change. We can identify the loading dock gate as an add alternate. That's another $28,000. So there's a point of diminished return in some of these things, but as you can see, we're trying to identify scope items that are easily partitionable that we can identify on bid day as a potential alternate. So here's a recap: our total estimated construction costs, our budget, our variance overage. If we take all of these scope reductions and all of the additional project alternates, we still have a delta of $891,538, which is a variance of approximately 3%. It's worth noting that within this number, within this 33.9 number, there's a design development contingency of $1.4 million. Traditionally, this is a contingency that gets accumulated into the construction document estimate. So it's standard practice to carry that type of contingency. There's also an escalation to June 2022 of $800,000. So beyond the CM contingency, beyond the owner's contingency, the existing design development cost estimate has, about $2.2 million in escalation and design contingency within that number. So that's more or less the analysis that we've done to date. I do have the site plan and the floor plan. Everybody wants to reference some of these items and what they look, if they need to refer to the site plan or the floor plan to understand the visuals that we're talking about here.
Any questions? Go ahead.
Well, more comments than anything else. We typically save this design development contingency and escalation contingencies or clauses for the work once it starts. We'll have other design development contingencies later we haven't thought of yet. So I think dipping into that money is a bad idea, not to mention that the escalation of 2.67% is, not, laugh out loud, but I mean, that's never going to do it anyway. So I think we got to go back and take some pencils with no erasers and start making more cuts someplace, because we're not going to even be close, because by the time we have this meeting again in a month or 6 weeks, prices will have gone up on certain items that we haven't been able to lock in. So I think we got a lot of hard work ahead of us here.
Richard, if I could just add just a couple of things. You did bring up a couple of points with some of the percentages on there. Just one thing is that the escalation that we have in the estimate, it's calculated out at 2.67%, but that's based upon the time from when the estimate was done to when we were going to bid. So that was actually based upon an 8% escalation per year. So it is a higher escalation amount than we, again, we look back to when the budget was set and it was 4%. We're now looking ahead at projecting twice the amount of
twice that. Okay. All right.
So,
okay.
So that's one thing. And then what's not in here that Justin may have mentioned this, that remains somewhat constant, is there's a there's a 3% contingency that's within our contract in our GMP as the construction manager for a contingency that's not reflected here. And then Jack, I don't know, there's an owner's contingency as well, correct? So I guess just before Jack does that, I mean, the thought is that the 1.4 for design development and the 799, those are two contingencies that essentially when we get to bidding time, those two contingencies are at $0 because you're now done with escalation. You're locking those numbers in and the design is done. So that contingency is also gone. So those are two contingencies that are not expected to be there on the day that we go to bid.
Right. So we're even more so behind then.
Right.
Money wise.
Right. So as David just described, those two contingencies, will get absorbed as the construction documents are developed.
Right.
The owner contingency right now, we're carrying approximately $1.25 million as the owner's contingency to handle change orders and other unexpected elements.
Okay. Any other questions?
I guess I'm just saying the same thing. $1.25 million for a contingency fund in this climate is pretty scary.
Pretty scary is right.
It's
very
not
scary.
It's not bad.
It's not bad, but it's not comforting. I'll tell you that.
Right.
Especially with these numbers. I mean, some of the things that you're talking about cutting out of the scope and all that kind of stuff usually are the kinds of things we'd like to add in because we've saved money. Once the project goes out to bid and we start getting things done.
Know.
But we're not going to be able to save any money anywhere. We have to really start looking at this more surgically. I think we've got to come up with some creative ideas that are going to stand the test of the future. I know nobody can predict the future, but it doesn't look like these numbers are going to hold up in 6 months even.
Nope. That's something we can't control, Rich. I mean, that's unfortunate. It's sad. You're right. And it's, I don't know, what do we say?
Well, I think it's part of the planning process. I
bid.
mean, as professionals that we have hired, if the climate is such that these numbers are gonna, are gonna inflate again by the time we go to bid, we need to start thinking of professional approaches to making the project work with the monies that we have, which is that 30-something million dollars. We're not going to be able to run this, in 6 months is when we're going to be done with our design and ready to go to bid. 6 months from today, I can see prices going up another 5 or 10%.
Totally agree.
Across the board.
That's when construction's going to be underway, not when we're going to bid. We're going to be going to bid in 3 months.
Right.
In 3 months.
Yep.
Well, not according to the SWOT. I just heard that we're not going to be doing anything until September.
John?
Well, those dates we talked about, that would be potential start of construction date. The bidding would occur as soon as we got OSCG approval. If the documents are done in June, we would expect the release to go to bid in July.
Okay, well, that's
so again, we're splitting hairs. It's still months down the road, not weeks down the road, and the market is doing, unfortunately, what the market chooses to do, which, although we've carried, as Dave remarked, the escalation is built on an 8% per year times the number of months to the bid period, giving us the 2.67% further escalation. But again, no one a year ago would have anticipated that what happened in the last 12 months would have totaled over 13%. That's truly unprecedented.
and I agree with you 100% that no one would have been able to predict that. But I think that in the back of all of our minds, I think we know that it's going to go up. So what are we going to do as professionals and as a building committee to anticipate an additional spike in prices so that when we go out to bid, in July, that we come back with numbers that are even close to, because then we, if we don't come with numbers that are even close, I'm kind of thinking we haven't done our job. So we have to figure out a way to anticipate those prices going
Our
up.
job, the fact that bids come in at a different number, Rich, we can't control that. And that's something we have to look at. The bids come in much, much higher and it's way over budget. Then we have to go back to the town and say, hey, man, we're way over budget. We can't do this building for that number. What do you want to do now? Well, we got to go out. We got to continue doing what we're doing and get the thing out on the road as soon as possible and see what the numbers are.
So there's no more additional cuts that we can make than the ones that we've come up with
Then I say,
so far.
let's go out to bid. Let's get the bid, see what the bid number is going to be. And then we have the number, we know to the town, what the number is going to be. And we say to the town, look, instead of being the $30 million, it's now going to be $35 million. What do you want us to do? That's not our decision. It's the town's decision, Rich.
No, I know, but we're in a position to press hard as we can on cutting these numbers with the anticipation that the number that we're going to get is going to be higher. So we should at least try to do that.
We did.
Now,
we
so
did
far,
do
you're
that.
telling me we tried. I just question if we've tried hard enough.
Well, I think we have. We've been through this 3 or 4 times now. And I think, bringing on the construction manager and going through this whole thing and talking with the consultants we have a number. We have to try and get out in the road and see what we have.
Okay, well, how's this affect their contracts with us? That's the question.
sorry?
Jack, I have a question for you, Jack.
Yes.
Okay, so in July, we go out for bid, and the lowest bid is $36 million, all things considered. So now we have to go back, like Dick says, and tell the town that, we got a problem. Okay, fine. Someone comes along and says, well, we're going to have to reduce the scope of the project, so we'll fit into the $32 million. How does that affect your contract with us? I mean, how long are you going to work with us, and how long is OMG going to work with us with their contract to come up with a square peg to fit into a round hole here? It's what we're kind of looking at almost. And that's what concerns me about the future.
You're right. There is a component to, extended duration of professional services that would be on the table. That's that's a fraction of what we're talking about as far as construction costs. And to loop back to that list of potential value management items, although the Board of Ed folks have been, the district staff have been at the table, these things have not been fully vetted as to, as was mentioned, we can lop off the stage and save 1,000 square feet, but it's difficult to put back 5 years from now.
Oh yeah.
If we change, or if we eliminate site furnishings, those could potentially be purchased separately, although there is the diminishment of the usability of the site if you do that. So all of these areas, although they are potentials, and not to be flippant and all, but to say ideas were brainstormed to see what would throw it at the wall and see what would stick. Just because there's a number that $18,000 to change the piping from cast iron to PVC, that might not be perceived to be of value. So that may come right off of the list. Lopping off the stage might not be perceived as a value. That's reduction in program, and the board may not consent to that. So again, there is a delicate balance between potential reductions, practical reductions, and what's left over is a delta in cost that needs to be discussed. Are we authorized, would the town authorize the project to move forward at a higher number than what was approved at referendum? And if so, how far can the town go at the behest of the finance committee versus having to return it to referendum before we could get their green light? So there are quite a number of questions still to be vetted. The intent of tonight's presentation was to show you that we're looking at considerations large and small, so that we can try to mitigate what's happened in the market. As this Tecton slide showed, even if we take out things that could be considered scope creep, just the impact because of the escalation in the market is a greater number still than the scope creep was. Yet the delta between what we can afford and what the estimate comes to is much less than the total of those two items, which speaks to the design team's credit that they are not gilding the lily. They're looking at this very practically. As was noted, out of the 2,200 square feet, adding the basement back into the calculation, it's only impacting us by 1,100 because they've designed a very efficient floor plan.
Right.
So I think that you've got a design team that's working very diligently on the town's behalf. And now it's a matter of a value judgment. You know,
See where it comes-
which of these options to trim costs is truly delivering value to the town long term?
Right.
As
Okay.
as Mr. Burns, brought up about the sidewalks. What are we adding to operating costs, and is that a fool's errand? And the
Okay.
delta at some point there will have to be some discussion. Likely, as you saw, if we took everything, we're still looking at a
Okay. All right.
$900,000 delta.
Mike Egan.
Yeah, Tom, I saw you had your hand up. I didn't know if you had something. Mine's probably going to get into the nitty gritty of some of the VE items. I didn't know if you wanted to say something first.
You want to say something first, Tom?
No, I'm
Go ahead.
So I have some questions about the VE, specifically the HVAC. But first, I think we missed this. It's obvious that you guys did a tremendous amount of work reconciling this budget and come up with VE items. We really appreciate that. I know we're getting hung up on the overages and the schedule, but that's definitely a lot of work that was above and beyond, and we do appreciate that. It's an extensive VE list. You didn't just pick the good ones. You picked ones that are small items too, and
Okay.
we do appreciate that. The other thing is, I'm not sure that the Public Building Committee has a clear idea of what you guys are requesting of us tonight. Do we need to vote on these VE items? Are we waiting to hear from you? Is there anything we can do to keep the design going and keep you guys full speed ahead?
I
Or
think
is it just to bring us up to date?
one area that was influenced by the input of the building committee was, of course, in concert with the Green Energy Task Force was going with the geothermal system.
Right.
If that's something that you feel comfortable pulling back from and going back to a more conventional system, as was described, that's $1 million savings and would go a long way to allowing that element of the design to
That
mature.
approach was in the original design as well, was it not?
That was one of that type of system is compatible with the original budget. Let's put it that
Yeah.
way.
So I
'Cause
think based
nothing
on the
was
original
designed.
budget that got approved, we should stick with that.
I agree, Dick.
I
That's
agree.
Can I ask
an
some questions
obvious-
about it first?
Go ahead.
So that 1.1 or 1 point something $million alternate, did that include removing the $500,000 covered or carried for wells?
Yeah.
Good question.
I believe-
You're talking about the VE or the
The VE
the alternates? Okay, because there was an alternate to go from 50% to 100% wells. 'Cause
I'm talking about the VE deduct to go to a VRV system.
It took
Is
out.
that 500,000 for the system change and 500,000 for the wells?
I don't know exactly, Mike, the exact breakdown. I mean, we have it in our computation sheets. We can get a little more detail of that for you, so you know what that value is, but it is the full system. I just don't know exactly what breaks up that number.
Okay, but the wells are included in that deduct.
Yes.
They are.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
With VRV, there are no wells.
My next question is, if the 50% wells are taken out of the base and made an alternate, does that affect the equipment for heating and cooling that we would need to upsize if those wells were not provided?
Brian, correct me if I misspeak,
In
but
the sense
if-
of, yeah, sure, go for it, Jack.
if you don't have wells, you need to replace that with something. And weren't we talking about an air-cooled chiller?
Air-cooled chiller, yes.
Brian, you said something?
Well, the option is to go to VRF. So that would just be air source heat pumps on the roof, no geothermal.
I understand that. I'm saying we've got 50% wells in the base bid. So you've got to have some type of cooling central equipment and some type of heating central equipment to offset that extra 50%.
Correct. I mean, there's multiple options we could do. We could do water source heat pumps as that option, and remove the air source heat pumps off the roof. Part of the value engineering is also just keep the condensing boilers for heating. So that heat pump chiller heater that we were going to have, is not going to be part of the project anymore. It would just be the VRV system. So it would be really a matter of doing the VRV water source. If we're able to get the half geothermal, then just doing the DX heat pumps for the DOA units, or it would be just doing air source VRV.
I guess I'll ask it a different way.
Okay.
What I'm talking about is making all of the wells an alternate. What impact would that have on the rest of the system if the town was to say, we will finance the wells at a later date? What would that do to the base bid? Is it as simple as deducting the value that ONG has carried for the wells? Or is it more complicated because now you've got to upsize some of the equipment you've had and you're taking out the multi-stack unit?
Yeah, it would be more complicated. You'd have to run some calculations on that.
Okay.
Well, but you just put a chiller. You have the boilers. And when you reduce the size of the geothermal system or the wells, probably you had a cooling tower. You had to reject the heat somewhere.
Lucian, are those boilers sufficient for the expanded building size?
Absolutely. The building was sized. The boilers were selected to heat the building the way it is right now.
Right.
So
I guess
You've already paid for those.
Can we explore
No,
that?
what I'm
we
saying
paid
for
for
the
that.
with the additions.
Removing the wells.
Right.
Removing the wells from base. Can that be VE item 1 for HVAC, and then VE item 2 will be the VRV system? And the other question I have about the VRV system is, it seems like that would help phasing tremendously. Has that been considered for the schedule?
Mike, as far as we have not rerun through the schedule durations based upon, the possible VE of scope.
What's your best guess? Would that help us?
Well, I mean, the geothermal not being in the project, certainly, I don't know how much it's going to expedite construction, but I would say from Principal Luzetti's standpoint and the environment that he's going to have for the students around that building, we're going to be taking up far less real estate if we're not doing all those wells out there. So if nothing else, those kids will likely have a place to do some activity while we're out there during some of the phases where they would normally be very constrained on that property.
Tom, Roy, you had a question?
Yeah, and I apologize. I know I'm kind of coming into the game late, but assuming the geothermal system comes in, what's that going to do to the annual operating cost? Can we put an ROI to this system? I mean, it's a big spend, and I would hope to see that it would be, offsetting some of the operational costs.
10 years payback, Tom. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, Lucian, you're probably in the right ballpark. We haven't done that low, we haven't done an actual energy model to actually see what that cost, will come up to be.
Given what energy prices now, it's probably quicker.
The VRV, it's relatively energy efficient.
Yep.
And I don't know lead time, but I think probably it's 4 or 5 weeks at this time.
Less complicated.
At least.
Excuse me?
Less complicated.
The lead time, I think it's better than if you try to go chillers or heat pumps or.
It's also worth noting that a VRV system is zero carbon, which was another of the Energy Task Force's main goals.
Exactly.
So it's still definitely possible to pursue net zero or future net zero with the VRV system. I don't think we're losing much from
does make a difference.
Yep.
Okay, move on. Anything else? Okay, what else, John? Anything else in this area?
Again, if we're not settling on any VE efforts tonight. You know, the discussions will continue on with the district staff. At the last meeting, we had recommended that we adopt a twice-a-month cycle for these meetings, not just for tonight, but in the months looking forward until we're ready to go out to bid, because there will be decisions that need to be made on a more than monthly basis, or more recent than or quicker than monthly basis. But we do meet again in 2 weeks, April 4th. So
April 4th.
we can continue this conversation on what is palatable and what is unpalatable from a district standpoint, and then provide you with some updates there. And again, in either of these scenarios, it appears as though at some point somebody's going to need to approve a financial supplement to the project. We're just not seeing enough.
We gotta know what
things
we got to go out to bid first and see what the bid number is, John. When the
And
bid
as I
number
sta-
comes in, then we can tell you what the project is going to go ahead and not go ahead.
I agree with Dick. And before we would go to the state to ask for a reauthorization, we would want some
Right.
surety. But there is that intermediate step that we're going to have with the town before the state will even consider allowing us to go
Yeah,
out to
we'll
bid,
get a
as we
budget,
touched on.
get our
So
RFP out there, get the bids in. We know what the bid number is. Then we go to the town and say we need $2,000 more or not. We'll know what we asked for. We don't know what they asked for now. Then when we get to town, then the town goes to the state and says, we're adding $2 million to this project. We don't know until we get the money in. Do we know what the finances are?
Dick,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, if we could go back to your earlier statement about trying to do whatever we can to get this ready to go out to bid.
Yeah,
I think that's kind of where we are now.
that's where we are now. Yeah.
I do kind of agree with your most recent statement, is that at this point, we probably should go out to bid
Want the bid.
as many of these reductions as we can come up with. So the sooner we decide on like the HVAC system, which is the big number.
I thought we said to go ahead with that.
Well, no, I think you may have to put that to a vote tonight to go ahead and give the design team the
Make a motion?
authorization.
Jack,
that.
Wait.
Jack,
No.
what you said is that we are not able to pursue the path that Dick was talking about. We need to take an intermediate step to get approval to
From
even put it out to bid if we think that it's going to be over budget. Is that correct?
I don't
No.
believe so. No.
that is correct. The state will not give us permission to
State
go out
will.
to bid.
Hang on a second. We got to make the decision here first before we give it to the state. We don't know what the decision is without getting the bids in. Once the bids come in, then we can
That-
make that decision and go to the state and say,
That's not accurate, Mr. Chair.
oh, we've
what-
done that in the past.
What we would, in a grant-funded situation, as Mr. Durr is saying, we would need to, or Mike, one of the in order for us to present our documents to the state in completed form and ask for their permission to go out to bid, whatever we project the cost to be needs to be covered by an appropriation by the town. And it might
So we
not
got to
be,
appropriate the money before we know
might
what
not-
it really is.
it might not be the final number, depending on what happens on bid day. But the state will look for that authorization. If the number differs from our 30.7 million that we currently have approved, the state is going to want to see something on paper, how we think we're going to pay for it.
John, sorry, theoretically, that could be something that could be presented to the Board of Finance without having to go to a referendum
Right.
for
That's-
authorization.
That is possible. And
That's
again,
possible.
depending on what progress we make on VE efforts, that will make that easier to sell to them with a smaller number.
Just for one follow-up, Jack, is you said grants. Now, we're getting a reimbursement on a percentage basis, but we're not really getting a grant, or are you calling that a grant?
The entity that we work through is called the Office of School Construction Grants and Review. So it is, even though it is calculated on a percentage reimbursement, it is looked at by the state as a grant.
It's a
Listen,
grant.
that's-
Okay, so that reimbursement is technically a grant, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to verify that the terminology that we're using.
Simple
Okay.
words is a grant. Yeah.
Mhm. So again, back to the
Tom,
VE.
what's your feeling on this, Tom?
Boy, put me on the spot on this one, Dick. I understand there is the process. I think where it gets tough is we would just really hope that, and I think we have a good team here, that the cost estimate is as accurate as can be. I think with the size of this project and everybody involved in this understands that since this went out to referendum 2 years ago, the world has been upside down.
Right.
So the fact that we're looking at a 3% increase, as much as I hate ever going back to ask for additional money, is completely within reality of the world we're living in now. So I don't
The
think,
question is, do we ask for more money before we go out for bid?
I think
Well,
unfortunately
get
with
the
the
numbers
state
first.
office, they're going to make us do that.
Okay, then let's do it. Let's go that way. I recommend that we go ahead and get this.
Sorry there, Dick. Look, similar to what Mr. Burns said a few minutes ago, I know that our superintendent has been in conversations with the town manager, with the chair of the Board of Finance. I think that as long as there's a mechanism to not put this to referendum prior to bids, that's the direction that we would like to pursue. So I don't know the details of those mechanisms through the various boards, but if there is an authorization that can work through the Board of Finance to say, let's get to bid so that we then know the real scope of the problem, I think that's kind of the desire of the board at this point, to keep this thing rolling and get to bids.
And to that end, with some significant design issues such as the HVAC system, a decision one way or the other on that. Other elements, I think it would be too big of an ask of the design team to design the entire HVAC system twice.
Right, I agree. So let's get that on the table.
But other elements that were discussed tonight as VE items or otherwise could potentially, if we can't come to closure on giving up certain features, as Justin presented, they can be included as alternates, so that when we go to the state, we're looking at the base bid number, not the total cost with all the alternates, because we don't know if we can afford them or not.
Right.
So
Respectfully,
that's
John,
another tool to manage it.
Right.
I just want to know kind of the scope of, one, our responsibility tonight, and two, if we're prepared, if we have the information to do what we need to do to push this back to the Board of Finance, if that's the appropriate mechanism, which it's. So one, I'm receiving conflicting reports whether or not it's our decision to make on those VE items or whether that's a Board of Ed decision. It sounds like the board's been in consultation on this, but I'd like clarification on whose decision it is on those VE items before we agree to them. If it's ours, great. If it's not, it's not.
Well, it's ours to make the final decision, but the Board of Education or the users has got to give us some conflict back that yes, this is workable, or no, it's not workable. So
Dick, then when I was going through asking questions and raising concerns over the VE items, and you said it's not our scope, what were you trying to get at?
The Board of Education or Jason has got to get to the board to say, hey, look, we designed this originally. We're not talking about doing this. Do you have a problem with this? And I hear that Michael, who is the superintendent down there, and Jason so far is saying they're aware of what we're looking to try to do. They have to say, we want to do this, not do this. This is okay. Richard, you've got a question.
Yes. I think if we just back up for a minute and think about what was said about the original referendum. Did the original referendum, or not the referendum, but the, I guess the first application to the state include the geothermal system or not?
No.
No. Okay. So as far as the Public Building Committee is concerned, okay, our responsibility is to go ahead and develop a plan with all of our professional help. And by the way, very nice job with what we've done so far. But to go ahead within that parameter. So we can vote on going back to a more traditional alternate that's not going to hurt the budget. That's going to help us. We can go with the
yes, we agree.
Right. Well, that's what I'm trying. We should be able to do that tonight.
Making here tonight. I say we should vote on it. Let them go ahead.
Okay, but let me finish. And these other items that Ryan was talking about, we can group all those into add alternates, every single one of them is an add alternate. And we can put this thing out to bid a lot faster. We can go back to the Board of Finance, say, okay, now, instead of being $800,000 short, maybe we're going to be 1.5 million, whatever it is short, and we need that extra money. Then we can go out to bid and all that stuff, whether it's, the stage lighting or reducing the stage or the amenities out in the backyard there where the playground is or where people are going to sit. All that stuff can be done as add alternates. And then the Board of Education can insist on, well, they've got to have that. Then they can go to the Board of Finance and get that money themselves. That's what Dick was referring to before to you, Ryan, about that's not our responsibility. Those kinds of things are almost like furniture. And yes, we kind of go through this every time where the Board of Education wants us to put as much furniture as, quote unquote, that's not the real word, but as much furniture into a school job as they possibly can, because quite frankly, they don't want to have the operating costs put onto their budget. So they're putting it into the school budget. I mean, into the.
But FF&E is part of this. It's always part of our scope. So we got to have a discussion over, what it is. And my point was only if we're being asked to take a vote on something and whether to shift something from as part of the base project to an add alternate. And I would like to know if it's our responsibility to do so. And I'm getting conflicting messages. It sounds to me like it is within our authority to shift.
Absolutely.
And so if I'm going to ask, I would like to be able to understand what it is I'm voting on is all.
Right. So
and
if
then,
we can see that list again, we can
vote on the whole
Justin that had the
vote on
list.
partial of it. You can vote on doing the whole list as he proposed, or we can take pieces out of it. I say we go with the whole list and see where it ends up with. But go ahead. Where do you want to go? Oh, what happened?
He's going to show us the list, I think.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, if I could, does it make sense? I mean, it seems that there is, and I understand what Neil Sullivan was saying. We are definitely trying not to go to the Board of Finance before we have to.
Right.
Does it make sense with the fact that we're having a meeting in 2 weeks? Do you want us to work with, the board, the finance, the director of finance and the town manager to find out what the process is?
What the process is. Yep. If
that may make sense before we start cutting and modifying.
Before you start cutting.
Out of the
Okay.
project.
You want to do that?
Well,
Anybody? Mike?
If we don't make decisions tonight, does that just put the whole process another 2 weeks behind?
That's right. Exactly. We can make
every
this decision.
meeting. We need to be informed of what is required of us, and if we fail to act, what impact that's going to have on the schedule.
Right. It's gonna hurt us if we don't make the decision tonight. And we've done it.
If we don't
Let's go
decide
back
on
and
anything,
make the
if
decision.
design
We always
team
go to the
stops-
board and change it one way or the other. We always come back and add it back on if we have to. Go back to where you start up with the schedule there. Show us it back, Mike, to where it was.
The
We have
list.
to add. Who had it? Mike?
Justin's working on it.
Here we go.
Okay.
Okay. So can we have a motion that we accept the design development cost estimate from 1 through 9?
I think we need to take these one at a time.
One at a time, don't go.
Whatever you want to do, go ahead.
I think we should.
If I may share a thought. Some of these may have, operational impacts, such as the landscaped areas, some of which were in the courtyards, which were intended to be outdoor classroom spaces.
Okay.
So that may have some educational operations impacts. So I think, we should afford the district an opportunity to comment on some of these. But in general, if we're taking the direction that what makes sense, such as the items 1 and 2, those will be done. Those have no operational impact. So those are, basically.
I think we vote on whatever we want to
Easy
see
money.
happen, and the Board of Education to decide on whether it has an impact on operations or not, after we say what we want to see.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
Mike,
Ryan.
I'm sorry. I have a procedural question because honestly, we have a lot of information. I appreciate the information that we received, but when we have like number 9 is a TBD as far as what the cost impact is going to be. Is there a way in which it sounds like there's more work to be done on figuring out both what the process is to go back to the finance board? So I guess the first question, when is the next time the board's meeting? Is it between now and our next meeting?
No, the next meeting would be scheduled for April 4th.
So that would be before our next meeting,
What?
right?
April 4th is your next meeting.
April 4th is our next meeting.
Right. When is the Board of Finance's next meeting?
I have no idea.
Is that because if the Board of Finance isn't meeting until after that time, then we don't have as much of a rush, correct?
I have no idea, sir.
I think it's a Tuesday.
I think it's a Tuesday too, but I'm not sure when.
So I think it might be the Tuesday
They
after the
changed-
Monday.
They've been changing like everybody else been changing.
Yeah, that's true, but traditionally it was Monday,
Board of
Tuesday.
Finance has changed their meeting 3 times already in the last month.
Then we can just move our meeting till after the Board of Finance meeting, if 2 days makes the difference between 2 weeks.
Right, or before the Board of Finance meeting. What I'm wondering is, can we move forward with processes as if we would approve this and see what the issues are without having to take a vote in the absence of complete information? I don't feel comfortable.
Why can't we vote on 1 through 8?
So
Because we don't, for one, know how apparently the Board of Education feels on all these, correct?
That's okay, Ryan. We
That's
don't
okay.
need to be, let me speak, Dick. Okay, Ryan, we don't need to be concerned right now about any of these cuts that we're looking at insofar as how the Board of Education feels, because they can add that in at any time they want. And they can go ahead and go to the Board of Finance on their own and say, okay, we want more, we want these other items included. So we're going to follow the recommendations. We're going to follow the recommendations of our professional teams to make these cuts and come up with a budget that's $900,000 over the referendum. Then we're going to send that information to the Board of Finance at their next meeting and ask them, hey, listen, guys,
Right.
and this is something that Tom would do, and say, you know, we're 3% over. We really need to add that money in so we can put this out to bid. And then we put any of these other items that look like the Board of Education would like as add alternates.
You can always
And it
add
goes
them
out to
later.
bid as add alternates. And then when we get the real bids back, then we'll know we're working with real numbers.
Right.
Because right now, even the Board of Ed can't make an absolute decision on the reduction of landscape tables of $150,000.
Absolutely correct.
Because it hasn't been put out to bid yet, we don't know that real number. So the add alternate is the key. That's the key.
I would say, Rich, why don't you make a motion and move this forward? Rich?
Yeah.
Make a motion.
I make a motion that we take the recommendation of our design team to make these cuts as detailed in the presentation tonight, and move forward to bringing this information to Board of Finance as is.
Second? We have a second? No second. I'll second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 2. All those not in favor?
nay.
Nay.
2, 3. All right, not in favor. Okay, what do you want to do?
Like we said, I think we got to take them one at a time, but Jack and Dave, when I've done VE before, this is a list to flush out interest and not a hard value. Can you confirm that you're just looking for us to say, yes, pursue this, and no, definitely not, take it off the list, and that kind of guides the next steps?
We want to pursue it.
Yeah, I'd say from our
Hard
perspective,
value
and I'll
that
let-
we're going to deduct from the bid.
right, no, I guess, right, the goal here, I think that we're looking for is that the design team needs a direction to proceed in here, right? We can't do anything with going to bid until we have a completed set of bidding documents. So the idea with this value management list is to get some pivoting done, right? And where does this design need to go? What are the different trajectories? Because I think until some of these things are worked out, I'll let Justin and Jeff talk to that, but we're not going to be advancing the design, and it's going to, again, it's going to infringe on the completion date of the documents, which will impact bidding.
let me see if I can jump in and help out here. So items 1, 2, 7, 8, and 9 are items that we're gonna do, we think are good value regardless. It's not going to change anything in this in as far as the quality or durability. Those are things that we should do no matter what. It's just good design. So we're gonna do those. So those are off the table.
Which ones are those again?
We're
One.
off the table.
One,
1,
1,
2,
2.
7, 8, 9.
What about 5?
Oh, hold on. 5 is really, we would ideally like a decision because we need a direction on a mechanical system.
I thought we were gonna go.
If there was a couple questions from Mike Egan about some alternate pricing, we can work on that alternate pricing between now and April 4th. So that we have all of that, if that's the committee's wish, we can do that so you can see it.
Alternate pricing on what?
I'm sorry?
Alternate pricing on what?
To make the building geothermal ready.
Yeah. There was a couple kind of modifications that Brian needed to do a little homework and we needed to price. So if we could put, let's just say the MEP options kind of on a slide for the next meeting so that we can have an informed decision and make a decision at that point. I think that's fine for our team.
Everybody agree to that?
Well,
No.
I don't want to slow you guys down. That was
Right.
more theoretical. If pricing out two different options, I understand the desire to not design two different systems.
Right.
If that is going to put a stop to any progress we're going to make, then please don't explore multiple
Okay.
HPC options on my behalf.
So then the idea would be to make the committee make a decision on item 5.
Yeah,
I
1,
think
2,
it's-
5, 7, no,
Yep.
8, 9.
I'm sorry.
Can we
Just-
learn? Can
Hold
we
on
learn
one-
a little bit more?
Hold on. What?
Hold on one sec. So I already told you the ones that you really, we're going to do out of good practice. Items 3, 4 can be add alternates that we can identify in our scope. So we can, okay, so that you don't have to make a decision on. 5, you're
Right.
going to need to make a decision. 6, I think we need to speak, we need to go back. That's a programmatic change that we need
That's an
to,
add alternate
we could possibly do an all.
or
add alternate.
deduction.
Right.
Yep, add alternate deduction. Yep.
So the really.
And 7.
The only one, well, 7 is the easy one. I think we can
That's the easy one.
take
Let's
that
vote.
off.
The only one we need to vote on is 5.
No. 1, 2, 5, 8, and 9. Those are all in the same thing. They're not going to change the program for the kids.
Everybody agree to that?
No,
No.
I have a
could add
question
7.
on, I have a question on 6. Jeff, you had said that's a change to the program. By that, I believe you're saying that that's a change to what was in the original documents, correct?
Yeah.
That scope reduction. So
Yes,
that's a true scope change that would at very least need to go through the Board of Ed, correct?
It needs to go, we need to review it with the school district and
Right.
the principal,
Board of Ed.
Neil, everybody needs to kind of look at it to see what the impact is. That's why I'm just saying that this is kind of the first time they've probably even seen that on the list. So
Yeah,
that'll be a
okay.
painful one.
All right, so we need to vote on 1, 2, 5, 8, 9.
Yes.
Well,
Right?
The other ones would be all add alternates.
Right.
I think Mike has a question.
Mike?
Tom, what are your thoughts on the PVC inside the building? To me, I don't think that's a smart value, and the escalation in PVC is way outpacing cast iron. So I have doubts that you'd even realize savings by the time you got to bid.
I would probably on that one again. I'm coming in late. I would think it's up to I would trust the designers on this one, and it seems relatively small. I mean, we're talking $18,000
Yeah, it's not a-
It's an
compared.
easy
I
one
mean,
to get a add alternate on, because sometimes you're right. It
You can
just
add
put
alternate later.
and then it
yes.
could be a plus or a minus. We've seen it
Right,
both ways depending on market. So that's, we
Right.
can handle that one that way, Mike, if that works.
right.
That's fine.
I also have a question for Eric, just if I'm reading something correctly. I'm looking at the Board of Finance agendas. Am I seeing correctly that they meet twice bi-weekly and that their next meetings would be on the 5th and the 6th?
Yeah,
That's,
that's what they schedule, but they don't always meet those dates, Ryan. They schedule them like we do, but they cancel them when they're not gonna have a quorum or agenda.
Okay, but we couldn't plan for anything other than that, correct, Mr. Chairman?
That's correct. Those are the 2 meeting dates that they have.
Okay. So the way I'm looking at it is if we meet on the 4th, as planned, there should be a Board of Finance meeting immediately after that.
Yeah,
With-
let me check the calendar, but that would make sense.
So if we had a more, if between now and our next meeting, all of these items were reviewed with our team and with the Board of Education, we would be in a position to take any necessary votes prior to
Okay,
the Board of Finance meeting.
okay.
Meanwhile, we certainly could give our design team direction as to where we think we should go. In
That's what we're
tonight's
trying to
meetings,
do. That's what we're trying to do, is tell them to take these items 1, 2, 5, 8, and 9 and say, we kind of agree with what you're doing here. Give us the information on the others for our next meeting. What are you asking for, other than that?
I'm trying to understand what our strategy is and what it is that the Board of Finance will need and what we need to do to make sure our design team has what they need to move
We
forward.
need to know
And the
what-
Board of Finance has
We
what they
need to
need
know, we need
to
to
make
know
their
what the,
decisions.
we need to know what the project is gonna cost us when it's all done and over with. With these or without these. Right?
I believe that answers part of one of the questions I posed, correct?
So what do you want us to do?
I think we need to think about the schedule. And I think we need to, get our design team moving forward
Okay.
by giving them the direction.
So
about getting-
what we gotta give them the directions. What do we want them
I-
to give us on April
I
4th?
want them to take out 1, 2, 5, 8, and 9 now. I don't want to wait 2 weeks. Take it out
That's
tomorrow
the
morning.
point. That's the point I'm trying to say here.
I agree, but we can't seem to get the message clear. Everything else on this page can be an add alternate. They've already said that it can be an add alternate. And that's what the process that we've used for 20 years. We can keep doing the same
agree.
thing. It works.
I agree.
So that's.
I have no
where I'm at.
problems with any of that except for item 6. And item 5, I think we have to make a decision on tonight to give our design team direction.
All right, let's deal with
Item
number
6,
5.
item 6 can be an add alternate.
Hang on a second. Let's do one at a time.
Whoa.
Let's
Can we-
let's take the main items that are a concern of us. Item 5, for instance. Let's all agree on whether we stay with item 5 to revise a chilled beam mechanical to VRC or not.
Yes.
We haven't
May-
heard anything but 3 letters on what the design team means by VRV. I can't make a decision on that until we hear more.
May I say something, please?
Go ahead, Lucian.
All right, so this is a huge change in the scope for the engineer to redesign and do the VRV. So before we go there, let's go back. And at some point we were talking about when did geothermal come into place and what was approved at the beginning, the scope of work, and what was the budget at the beginning. The beginning was a conventional system with chill beams,
Right.
DOAS units like we have now in the building with boilers and chillers.
Right.
We have the boilers. The boilers, we pay $290,000. We have the boilers. So the only thing that we are missing the source for the chilled water. With the chilled water, we were making the geothermal. So we are paying $1.5 million to make chilled water. What happens if we buy a chiller, an air-cooled chiller, $200,000, $300,000?
Changing the whole goddamn thing.
And this is exactly what we budgeted, or it was budgeted from the very beginning. This thing that we are trying to make the building geothermal ready and things like that, I don't think it's realistic. It's either we have geothermal, we don't have geothermal. And if we decide that we don't have geothermal and we go with a VRV system, That's a big change. And then the boilers that we pay $280,000, we don't use them. The building is all electric. So that's what
Look,
happens when you go to
what about the old-
system.
What about the old building? In other words, you know, the old building's going to use those boilers.
Which old building?
What's left? In other words, we're gonna put two big additions, one on the left, one on the right.
No, it's a system that's in the entire building, Rich.
Okay,
That's
okay,
it.
all right.
You take the $280,000 that we spent for the boilers, and you take the boilers and take them somewhere else in another building in town. It's not going to be in this building.
Mm.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Brian.
Well, Lucian, I mean, yeah, you're mostly correct in that we're going to be full electric with the VRV. You know, I mean, we could still use the boilers and do like preheats for the DOA units. But yeah, we'd get the main source of heating out of the VRF units. So if you get rid of the chilled beams, it's not as much hot water you're sending around to the building as you would to the chilled beam terminal units.
But does it make sense to have big boilers and pumps and pipes just to get a preheat? You just use electric heat, or you use heat pump, right? At that point, because it's installation cost. It's labor that you have to do, you know, run pipes around the building.
I mean, the easiest switch now would be to keep the chilled beams and everything we have and just go air cooled chiller.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it.
We have, at this time, we have $500,000 in wells in this budget. Plus, we have the multi-stack chillers, right? Probably they are not the same size as they were 2 months ago, but still there is $200,000-$300,000 in chiller there.
Sure.
So
And
the
Lucian,
money that
if
we pay
have-
for the multi-stack, we buy an air-cooled chiller.
Yeah, you buy the air-cooled chillers, and we could even leave on connection points for if you wanted to go those chiller heater units, in the future, go full electric and get off the condensing boilers. That could be an option.
It's a tapping on the pipe. I mean, it's not a big deal.
Yep. No, I agree with you.
So if we can see the cost for that, maybe how much it is. Maybe it's not going to be $1 million, but maybe it's $600,000 or something like that. And there is no, I mean, we stay with what we promised. I mean, what was promised in the beginning.
You're shaking your head. What does that mean, Brian?
I mean, I'm in agreement with you, Lucian.
Then why don't we do that?
Air-cooled chillers is a better design.
John, you got that information?
I'm looking through old minutes to see when the Clean Energy Task Force
Don't look through
conversation
old
happened.
minutes. We're talking about what's sitting on the table right now in front of us.
The clean energy tax, Jack, it was
recommend we stay with
probably,
the-
I don't know, sometime in the fall.
It did come from the Clean Energy Task Force. That was one of the options that Derek at CES
Right.
presented, and we decided to go with that because we thought it would be the most expensive, and we had the fallback options.
So
And now we're
going
at
to an
the-
air-cooled chiller, it's not a big, it doesn't change the design. It doesn't change anything from what we have in the building right now. It's
Right.
just to get rid of the wells outside and we buy a chiller. And
Yeah,
I think it will,
so sorry, Lucian, we do have a number identified. We'll just have to verify it. We'll send it over.
yeah, just double check, Jeff, if it's possible, if it makes sense. I don't know.
So let's leave it on the table, have them come back next week and give us an update on this design development costs. Does that make sense?
You know,
Yeah.
trying to redesign the whole thing, it puts them back big time. I mean, it's
Right.
not something that will happen tomorrow.
Okay, so
I agree.
we have a DDR meeting tomorrow with the state, which I'm sure we're going to be asked about, where our budget is, because we're not the only project in the state that has this issue. So we may learn a little bit more as far as their strategy too, and what's acceptable and not acceptable to them.
Okay,
We'll continue on with what you asked for tonight and put that information together in a packet similar to the format you saw.
very, very similar. Yeah.
And then on the 4th, we'll make some decisions. Between now and the 4th. We'll have an opportunity to review it with the school district to get their opinion so that we can adequately describe their reaction to these. So,
Right.
Okay.
Are we aiming at the 4th, or did I hear a moment ago discussion about coming back next week? Just
No,
when
let's
I'm-
do the 4th.
Okay.
Can I ask Lucian a follow-up question? Lucian?
Yes, please.
Yeah, now, when you say you're gonna go with a $200,000 chiller, okay, does that mean you're still gonna have individual, the possibility for individual condensation in the classrooms, or is that
The
eliminate that?
system, it's the way it is right now with the chill beams, whatever, and I don't think you'll have condensation.
No,
You're-
we're not gonna have condensation issues.
We are going to, Richard, to get to your point about the operable windows for egress, we're gonna,
Right,
we'll have an answer for you. We'll coordinate with CES to make sure we have an answer for that
Right.
concern.
right. Okay, I just want to make sure whatever system he's talking about is gonna save money and give us
Yep.
some more options with the windows.
And when we
That's
come
great.
back in 2 weeks, we'll also have a clear idea of what it is this
Yes.
committee needs to do in order to move this through both to the Board of Finance and
Tom,
OSC
you'll
GNR.
check that for us, right? You'll check that for us, Tom?
You want to check that we're still good for the 4th, right?
No, that we have when we come back on the 4th, that we have a clear idea of what it is this committee needs to do to get whatever overages we have to the Board of Finance, what information they will need, because they will be meeting possibly the next night. And hopefully we'll be able to put this on their agenda for that meeting.
Yep, no problem.
Okay.
Also, just a quick question for Jack on the OSC GNR process. Given that we're moving backwards on the kind of net zeroness and increasing costs, is that going to impact our reimbursability?
It will not. They're,
Okay.
No.
they're not involved in that aspect.
Mr. Sullivan, can you let Janice know who you're with so we get that on our records for us?
Yeah, with the school system.
Okay, yeah, but tell her what you are with the school system, sir.
Yes, Assistant Superintendent.
Assistant
Okay.
Superintendent of the Simsbury Public School System, Janice, okay?
Okay, got it.
Now? Okay,
Yes.
any other questions in regard to where we are at this point? Okay, the next item I have is we have a bill from Arcadius that goes back to last December. Janice, you were gonna check, did we approve this bill back in December?
There was a mix-up in the invoice numbers that were included. I guess something was misread into the record. This was presented at one point in time, but the invoice number that was recorded therefore was different. Therefore, finance wouldn't pay the bill. So this
Okay.
is just to kind of catch up
All
on
right, I
some
make a
some
motion
leftover.
that we accept invoice number 34268769 in the amount of $13,750 that goes back for December of 2021 to Arcadius.
So moved.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Okay. And now we're gonna set our meeting for April 4th at 7 o'clock via Zoom.
We're not done yet, sir. We have one other item on the agenda tonight. This is a proposal from TRC, our environmental consultant.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, that was this item B.
That goes to you. You have to sign that, not us.
No, they work for the town.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
So, part of their scope of work was to review what is known as a phase 1 site analysis, which was done at the time prior to the grant being applied for last year.
Right.
As they reviewed that, there were some areas of concern that were identified. And so now a phase 2, which is a more in-depth investigation. Phase 1 basically is looking at historical records. Phase 2 actually results in doing some test wells and other
I
investigations
thought
on
we
the site.
voted on them to go ahead and do this for $21,000 way back when. Is
That
this now
their-
it's
their
together
init-
as a contract?
Their initial purchase order included surveying the building for hazardous material and doing a review of the phase 1, which involves the site.
Yep.
Now that they have done so, they've identified the need for additional testing for the site. They've already done.
This
the
is additional
of the building.
testing, this $21,000?
This is additional. So the proposal describes what they intend to do on the outside of the building with a budgeted number. And this is as they stated, is conservative. It may not be as
Okay,
extensive as this.
The question is, You've
21
agreed, hang on, John, listen to me. You agreed to have all this done for the town at the amount of $21,849. Is that correct?
No, sir, that is not correct.
Why? It was written out to you, sent to you, not anybody else.
I'm facilitating for the benefit of the committee, the procurement of these consultants.
You
So
did not discuss this with them?
I discussed this with them on behalf of the
You
committee.
agreed to the number that they're what they're
I
going to
haven't
do?
agreed to anything. That's why
Okay,
I'm
you
bringing
agree
it
that
before the
what they're gonna
committee
do is
tonight.
right?
This is not an invoice.
This is not an invoice. This is a proposal.
Yeah,
If you accept
okay.
the proposal, we will increase their purchase order so that they can perform these functions. The actual price could be less.
Yeah,
We don't know. Yes,
just
Rich.
point of clarification. How much money have we spent with them so far?
I have to look at I don't have the
I don't have it in
record
front
of the original.
Was that
purchase order.
$21,000
I thought it
already?
was.
It may have been in that neighborhood. I don't.
It
I
may
don't
have been the same number. So I
Yeah.
think that's part of the confusion, why Dick is a
So-
little perhaps not clear on this. In other words, this has never been put before us.
That's
This is
correct.
a new estimate, new proposal.
That's
Whatever
correct.
they did so far, we did that and we paid for
February
it.
4th, they had a proposal to the town saying 21,849. I thought we agreed to that.
Well, it may be a coincidence that the numbers are the same, but they're two completely different scopes of work. What we authorized before was for them to review the phase one records and to do testing inside the building. That was the first purchase order. We now want to increase their purchase order to allow them to do the investigations outside of the building based on this proposal.
I'm confused because I thought we agreed to already have them do the work. Well, we already hired them for 21,849.
We did hire them.
Back in February.
We did hire them, but it was for a different scope of work. This is
Okay.
now the next bite from the apple, which I mentioned to the committee. When they reviewed the phase one, it may result in the need for additional investigation. And then ultimately, between what's in the building and what's outside of the building, the next step will be for them to design the remediation plan, which
Okay.
will be yet another increase to their contract or purchase
So
order
we need to approve the 21,849 to move ahead on this
for a phase two review. Yes.
phase two review. Motion? So made. Do I hear a
So
second?
moved.
Second. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Okay, John, we can go ahead and move with this.
Thank you. I'll
Okay,
let them know.
okay. That's it. So our next meeting is April 4th, 7 o'clock. Do a Zoom.
Yes.
Mike,
We
Mike,
need,
is it-
we need to approve last month's minutes. We didn't have quorum at the beginning.
Oh, okay. Good point. Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve March 7th meeting via Zoom?
Minutes.
Minutes.
So
Motion,
moved.
second?
Second.
Second. Any questions, additions, changes? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so this passes in favor, Judy. Thank you. And are we all set to do April 4th, 7 o'clock via Zoom?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay? Everybody agrees? Okay, we'll see you on April 4th at 7 o'clock via Zoom. Any other questions? Hearing
Motion
none,
to adjourn.
motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Thank you very, very much, folks. It's been a long one. Hope we got to move ahead.
Good night.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everybody.
Thank you.
It'll make the next one
Thank you.
easier.